Welcome, everyone. I'm Dagmar Timmer. I'm the Managing Director of Strategic Initiatives for OneEarth. And I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining this webinar from the unceded traditional and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nations. So today, we're excited to launch the Motivations for Lighter Living in British Columbia. This initiative is building on the work of Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund, which yielded 7 motivations for the Finnish population. They called them smart consumption profiles. We also have 7 different profiles. In both countries, we found that many more people take sustainable actions like zero waste in their daily lives than just the green values group. But their primary motivation is not saving the planet. So Citra's motivations have been used extensively as a tool by sustainable brands and social impact entrepreneurs, incubators for business planning, marketing, and also sustainable and circular innovation. Next slide. So the project is led by OneEarth and the Share, Reuse, Repair initiative with lead sponsors Vancity and Sitra in Finland. The co-sponsors were River Select Fisheries Cooperative, the Rebuild Hub, which is Unbuilders and Habitat for Humanity Restores Project, Cambo Energy Group, Moto Car Share, Hub Your Cycling Connection, and the Vancouver Foundation. So we're very excited about this, and we urge you to also share when you can. If you are on Twitter, on social media, those are some of our social shares. Next slide. During the webinar, you can use the question and answer function, and that function will allow you to upvote and see other questions that people are posing. At the end, we are going to have a question and answer segment. So I'm going to start with some welcoming and opening remarks, and then we'll talk a little bit about, who can use these motivations and how to mainstream lighter living and why this is such a priority. Then we'll hear from our 2 lead sponsors, Sitra and Vancity, about their experiences, give an overview of the approach and methodology, and then launch the 7 motivations. So my colleagues will be walking us through those 7, and then those will be put out publicly as a report in the coming week. So after that, we'll see the do-it-yourself toolkit, because the intention is always to be able to actually use these actively. And then we'll have a moment for questions and answers. So next slide. So when we saw the motivations in Finland being used, we realized that it would be such a great tool to bring here to British Columbia, mostly because it's of use both to the private sector and also to public-facing organizations for a whole range of reasons. It can help refine marketing strategy, identify target markets, expand the reach of our programs and services, and support our campaigns. So let's start with a little poll to find out who we have from the various sectors. Max. So you can just click on whatever represents your closest match. Great, let's close the poll. So we have a great group here from a whole variety of different backgrounds, from business to public sector, nonprofits, initiatives, and other campaigns. Thank you. And next slide. I'm just going to hand it to my colleague, Vanessa Timmer, who is the Executive Director of OneEarth, to walk us through why this is such an urgent priority right now to be mainstreaming lighter living actions in British Columbia. Again, just a reminder that you can put your questions in the Q&A box and vote for your colleagues' questions by clicking on the thumbs up. We'll be looking at both the open and the answered question areas throughout, and the chat box is also available for you for sharing resources.
Great, thank you, Dagmar. So as the motivation for this motivations project, well, as you saw, it's really about mainstreaming lighter living actions. And the reason we're extremely motivated to do that is this urgency. We have 10 years to reduce our carbon footprints by 50%. We're living as if we have 1.75 Earths, and consumption-based carbon emissions, if you actually look at direct and indirect emissions, 2/3 of emissions end up being connected to households across sectors of mobility, housing, food, goods, and leisure. So transformations in the ways we live are a necessary part of meeting our ecological and climate targets. And the magnitude is quite astounding. We need to get from 5 tons to 0.7 tons of carbon emissions per capita by 2050. And for high consumers, we need to reduce our lifestyle carbon footprints by 80 to 90%. And that's just in the high emitting categories. Of course, the point is that we can live good lives, perhaps even better lives, with lighter lives, what we can improve quality of life, health, and happiness. And most importantly, we need to do this with equity and justice at its core. Next slide. In fact, equity and justice are central because the top 10% of income earners, we generate about 48% of global emissions, with the top 1% emitting 15% of global emissions. So we can see that we don't only need to ask what are the lighter living actions, but who needs to be taking them, and how do we together get to better lives that live within our Earth's planetary systems, and do that justly. Next slide. So there's lots of strategies. How do we mainstream? Well, we need to do an ecosystem of linked strategies. We need to redefine what we value, what a good life is. And it's about also changing our cultural story. So engaging the arts and media in terms of how we think about what a good life is and what society should be about. And it's just very critical to note that our individual actions are not enough. We really do need a supportive context so that we can live lighter lives. We don't want to put the burden on individuals on their own, but actually there's key roles for government and business, and then also for people to be mobilizing and organizing to support those bold policy actions and business solutions we'll be talking about today. It's also better to connect with people in groups and in collectives. So some of the work that we want to do on making lighter living happen is with workplaces, neighborhoods, sports clubs, faith groups. And we want to take advantages of moments when our lives, our actions, our behaviors are in flux already. So how do we support people when they're, when they've moved house or retired or had a child or become a student at a college, and allowed them to enable them to create lighter living actions at that time. So the motivations you'll be seeing today is part of a wider ecosystem of strategies for mainstreaming lighter living, but it's critical because it's about understanding what drives people so we can tailor to their needs, wants, aspirations, and values, and also engage them in these larger strategies. So back to you, Dagmar.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. So the great news is that, actually just one slide back. Thank you. The great news is that everyone in BC that we surveyed actually engages in lighter living actions already. So these include things like biking, walking, transit, reducing their wasted food, making sure that they try to limit the demand, what their demand is on the planet. And so, the motivations are an opportunity for us to see people who might not be like us in terms of our motivations and see that opportunity space in everybody. So let's start with just another poll. What's your favorite sustainable living action? So these are some of the high footprint actions. Some of the actions that really drive down the footprint are these ones here. And so we're curious who enjoys one of these or sees these as one of their critical actions that they do. So repairing, reselling, composting, reinventing leftover food and new meals. All right, Max, let's see what we have. That's great. So, but getting things secondhand, we also found was highly resonant with the BC population. And reinventing leftover food and new meals is actually something that's been gaining a huge amount of traction. So next slide, please. So the key finding was that the tent is actually bigger than we think. So many people take sustainable actions in their daily lives, many more than are just the green or eco-conscious. But the primary motivation for these actions is not necessarily saving the planet. And so this informs our strategic thinking about how to communicate around lighter living actions. Many people in BC actually, of course, they care about climate change and climate action, but this doesn't necessarily translate to their everyday actions. Next slide. So what does this mean? It means that we should be stretching beyond those with planet motivations when we think about our programs and communications. We need to actually mainstream lighter living actions given the urgency of the crisis and engage everyone in this. And so the strategy is, how do we actually tailor to a wider set of motivations? Next slide. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to one of our lead sponsors on this project. Vancity has been a partner on mainstreaming lighter living in British Columbia for a number of years now, and I have with me Sarah Stott, the Director of Research and Insights for Marketing at Vancity. She's going to speak a little bit about why the motivations resonate for her and how she's thinking of using them. So just an extra note is that the Enviro Fund's 5-year focus on lighter living is one of the ways that Vancity supports community-led and strategic initiatives that build the culture and structure of support for sustainable everyday lives. Over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Dagmar. So happy to join the webinar today, really on behalf of the various teams at Vancity that have been involved in this project with OneEarth. So a little bit about Vancity for those who may not be totally familiar with us. So we're a financial values-based financial cooperative and Canada's largest credit union with about $30,000 billion in assets and over 550,000 members. We earlier this year made our commitments to becoming net zero by 2040, and we're also highly committed to reconciliation and social justice because we recognize that getting to net zero and helping climate action needs to put people first in that equation as well. So we've had a number of years where we've been looking at helping our members create more sustainable climate actions in their everyday lives. And it's been a pleasure to work with the team at OneEarth in partnership around those goals. And so we've been super happy to partner in this study. I just want to give a nod to Kira Going and our community investment team who really saw the value of this research and building this partnership with OneEarth. And I know there's going to be lots that we can gain from the outcomes from it. So in terms of this study, we knew about it and heard about it, and we actually ended up rerunning the survey with a group from our membership so that we could look at how does our membership differ to the BC market in general. And so it helps us to see where their motivations lie around planet priorities. And also we feel like we have enough information now. We've just seen the results of our membership survey just recently, and we feel that there's enough there to be able to help us target better in our communications as we're talking about climate activities, our marketing, and potentially our product development as well. And, you know, all in the interest of trying to move more people in the public and our membership along that spectrum of lighter living activities. So what's next for us is really connecting the outputs of this research and these motivations with other segmentation work and research that we have done internally across Vancity. And then also looking at supporting community partners and how we can help them and with the other co-sponsors of this research to really grow with us and help move the public and our members, like I said, across the spectrum of lighter living activities. So we're super excited that this gets launched to everyone today. And again, we just thanks OneEarth for doing this great work and look forward to seeing the outcomes across all the business and attendees here as to how they can utilize the research.
Thank Thank you so much, Sarah. It's such a pleasure to work with Vancity on so many different fronts. And I also am excited and am very glad to acknowledge Kira's role leading the partnership with OneEarth. So thank you, Sarah. Next slide, please. So I've noted that our inspiration was the Finland motivation study. And their brief was really to understand what drives any decision that is made by people. And that is the ethos that we brought forward into ours as well. And so our other lead sponsor I'm introducing is Sari Laine from Sitra, who leads their Sustainable Everyday Lives work. And she'll describe how the motivations originated in Finland and how this research supports them in mainstreaming sustainable living there. Over to you, Sari.
Thank you, Dagmar. So hello, and thank you for asking to give a short introduction of our journey on motivation profiles. So my name is Sari Laine, and I have worked the last 4.5 years as a leading specialist of sustainable everyday life in Sitra, Finnish Innovation Fund. Next slide, please. As you know, the global climate crisis is all over the news, but still the severity of the issue has not convinced us to take enough action. In Sitra, we started 4 years ago a project where our goal was to inspire Finns to take action towards more sustainable lifestyle. We wanted to get people interested of the impact of their daily choices. Next slide, please. As our goal was to inspire, we realized that we needed to do something differently. The traditional climate communication has not worked as good as we would like to. Some of us still think that sustainable lifestyle is about giving up, diminishing, to live kind of a lesser life. Many still think that sustainable life is not tempting enough to make any changes to their life. So we needed to have a new approach. So we started to think what motivates us to make decisions. We needed to understand every decision better. Motivation is the energy that directs our behavior. So we started to study different motivations behind the consumption decisions. Next slide, please. Here you can see the main motivational factors of Finns from 2017. Often saving the planet is not our primary motivation when we make choices. You can see that there is the environmental friendliness, but the primary motivations usually concern health and wellness, for example, saving time, being a member of a community, or bringing joy to our close ones. The big question is, how can we steer people towards sustainable choices using these separate motivations or motivation profiles? Next slide, please. Here are some examples how we use these 7 motivation profiles and the main motivations from previous slides. We have used these motivations in our 100 Smart Actions service. We have framed the smart actions always also with other motivations than the ecological one. For example, by lowering the temperature in your bedroom, you will sleep better and more restfully. So there are the motivations for wellness as well as the energy saving. In all climate actions, you can find another motivation to act than just the climate or nature-based motivations or planet motivations, like I saw earlier the term. We have also used these motivations in our company development program, which was organized for startups who have products or services which enable the sustainable lifestyle. Järkisärki, the picture over there, is a fish delicacy created of fish called roach that normally would be wasted, and it would lead to eutrophication of lakes. Järkisärki company used motivation profiles when developing their marketing materials. They got great results from grocery store chains, and that year their growth was 50% greater. The next year it has continued to be 30% greater. Also, our lifestyle tests have been framed not just purely as carbon footprint calculator, but broadly to test your lifestyle. So it's a disguise to be a test for your life. And it has been a great success with over 1 million times that someone has done the test. And the last example is from our NGO Challenge Prize competition, where the 4-H organizations team from small Finnish town developed plastic deposit system or experiment. In Finland, we have a deposit system already in our soda cans and glass and plastic bottles, and it has worked successfully since Helsinki Summer Olympics, which was in 1952. So we were kind of used to this kind of a system already, but this team used money savings as a motivation, but also community, as they developed a local currency, which could be used only in local shops. Next slide, please. Behind all of this is a community practice called Shift 1.5, where we share and learn from each other. We are very happy and very humbled that Canadian OneEarth organization is the first one to replicate motivation profile, which is one of the change-making tools in Shift 1.5 method library. OneEarth has done this work based on the work Sitra did in Finland, and now actually we are again using the lessons learned from Canada as we are updating Finnish motivation profiles this summer. This way we are continuously developing the change-making capabilities of all of us, as all the learnings from this project and the next one are also shared through community motivations, and those we can use in lifestyle. It will be very exciting now to see what different ways you come up with for using these motivation profiles in Canada. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions of motivations or Shift 1.5, please be in touch.
Thank you so much, Sari. It's such a pleasure to work alongside an incredible global group of people who all want to mainstream lighter living. And it's been a pleasure working alongside you. Thank you. So, well, here's the first time we're seeing them. These are the 7 motivations for lighter living actions in BC: waste not, want not, eco trends, shop style and social, healthy life and planet are all larger segments of the BC population. Rugged independence, practicalities, and work hard, live large are also very interesting ones to think about how to leverage. So let's find out how we got here. Let's find out how we got to these 7. First, it's important to note that we're talking about groups of people here. These that are displayed here, the 7, are actually the dominant motivations for BCers, and they're activated by different contexts. These are not individuals, but every BCer has a dominant motivation. So segmentation or target audience is a commonly used approach that companies use to ensure that their marketing and their innovation kind of meets a set of human needs and wants. However, when we're thinking about lighter living, we can't simply look at fixed factors of identity, such as demographics or general attitudes. So instead, this study is of groups of people that are activated in different contexts by their motivations. People make different choices depending on the situations that they're in. So I'm going to introduce you to Majid Khoury, who led the survey and analysis. In insight circles, he needs little introduction. Majid Khoury has over 30 years of market research expertise focusing on advertising and brand research, including with Ipsos, before going independent in 2012. And he works with international and local brands, including utilities, crown corporations, private national companies, startups, and nonprofits. So the main point is that these are groups of people, these are motivations. And the percentages are true that you see, but they're for the dominant motivation. So over to you, Majid.
Great. Thank you, Dagmar, and great to have everyone here with us this morning. So the way we approach this is first, we had 20 in-depth interviews that were done by our team, and our team sat with each of these individuals via Zoom. Again, this was done in the summer, and had a 90-minute discussion that talked about everything around their life, about stuff, food, how they get around, how they get involved in the community, what do they do at home. The important part to keep in mind that we did not tell these respondents that the study is about eco behaviors or the planet. So we didn't ask them specifically about what they do to save the planet as such, but really ask them about things they do and why they do it. And then we took this learning and created the survey that took a lot of the basic approach that Sitra had in Finland and adjusted it to BC in terms of what we learned in the qualitative. And we talked to 1,500 BC citizens in proportion to the province. And what we did is we asked them 65 attributes that were used in the cluster analysis around motivations, but also a lot of the actions they do around, again, their home, their food, transportation, community. And what this helped us to do was we ended up with 7 clusters, similar number as Sitra, and that wasn't done on purpose. It was just the analysis allowed us to feel that 7 is the right combination. And some of them were similar, some of them were not. But the most important aspect is once we did the segmentation around their attitudes, those attitudes have correlated with the actions that they do, which allowed us to feel very comfortable that this worked very well. For example, you've heard Dagmar talk about the segment that's Happy Life and Planet. So people who were motivated by this, the actions that they told us they do in general, really aligned with that motivation, and the same across some of the others. So the segments are interrelating motivations and actions, and they work very well. And you're going to hear about each of them and what makes them different in the next slides. So back over to you, Dagmar.
Thank you. Actually, Majid, I'll just do next slide. And if you can tell us a little bit about Modo's experience. Thank you.
Sure. In terms of the Modo and experience, you've heard from Vancity already in terms of their experience on this. And we did a similar experiment with Modo. We used a shorter survey, and in both cases allowed us to run the segmentation among Vancity members in the case of Vancity and Modo members here. And the learning were, as you heard before, very applicable overall in terms of allowing for different marketing approaches, etc. So the approach works well, not only in general, but for particular targets and understanding your customer base better along those motivations. And they do vary, not in terms of what motivates specific targets, but the size of the motivational segments between different organizations and targets. And now officially back to you, Dagmar.
Thank you very much, Majid, and thank you for thank you for all your leadership on this project. So next slide, please. So you've heard that one of the interesting things about these motivations and the way in which Sitra set it up was that we were looking at actions that are being done that are more sustainable across a whole range of the population, but we're making the distinction between those that are motivated by planet and those that are motivated by other things. So Lindsey and Issa will walk us through that in more detail, but click please. But the important thing to realize here is that if we're looking at mainstreaming lighter living in the face of the climate emergency and social justice, then we are aiming to move as many people as possible from the left to the right towards more sustainable living actions. And a big thing to notice here on this matrix is that Waste Not, Want Not is a very interesting group. They're doing the vast majority of lighter living actions that we asked about, but they're not primarily motivated by planet. So for those of us working in this space, they're a really interesting audience to be considering. Of course, the majority of BCers do see climate change as a crisis, but this doesn't necessarily lead or translate to their everyday actions. Next slide. So, okay. So So now we're going to hear about the 7 motivations. And first, you've seen them on the matrix now a little bit for a second. Of course, seeing eco-trends and healthy life and planet as more motivated by planet, and shop style and social maybe a little bit less, more action. So we're going to hear about them in detail, but first let's do poll 3 and see which motivation you guess that you might be in terms of your main motivations. So these are your dominant motivations. Let's take 20 seconds to do this and then we'll share the results. All right, so just take a stab at this because we are going to be doing this again once you've heard about all the motivations. And then you can see whether you still hold that opinion. All right, Max, close that up. Great, so lots of healthy life and planet feelings, and eco trends, waste not, want not, and shop style and social. And at this moment, nobody associating strongly with the other 3 motivations. Thank you so much, everyone. Now let's dive into the profile, into the motivations with the lead from OneEarth, Senior Associate Lindsey Boyle, who's an expert with 20+ years experience using research to understand people and inform marketing and innovation strategies. For the qualitative phase of the project, she's supported by a highly skilled team of researchers from the global insights agency, The Sound, including Issa Braithwaite, who is joining her. Lisa and Issa are going to be telling us about the 7 motivations for lighter living. Over to you, Lindsey and Issa.
Thank you so much, Dagmar. It's so exciting to be at the point of this work where we get to share with people that will hopefully put these to use in their work. And as Dagmar mentioned, these 7 motivations are not types of people. Each of us have a dominant motivation, but often we have secondary ones too. We might be one motivation for most of our choices, but have a different motivation in a certain context or occasion. I'll give the example of myself. I'm very sustainable, or try to be very sustainable in my food choices, but for transportation, I'm quite driven by convenience. I drive my kids to hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning, and because of the convenience relative to my other choices at that time of day, that's how I'm motivated. One other important note that we have as a team decided not to use the term profile to describe these motivations. While it is commonly used in market research as a term, we're in a know better, do better moment where we are aware that the term can be used oppressively in some contexts. And I'd like to thank Selena McLaughlin for bringing that to us as part of our work with Modo as a co-sponsor. And so that said, the project team and some of the people who are speaking today did use that term profile for many months. So we may slip up, but moving forward, we are committed to removing it from all reports and resources related to the project. So what am I going to go through? For each motivation, we're going to share the primary and secondary motivation for each, which are really the distillation of many common attitudes that make this motivation meaningfully different than the other 6. Issa, my colleague from the Global Insights Agency, The Sound, and I conducted the interviews last July from the qualitative phase of the research. These were used very much to inform the quantitative survey. So we have the chance to play some of the audio clips from the people we met in the interviews to bring these motivations to life, which is much more interesting than just listening to us explain them. The names have been changed to protect people's privacy. After we share the clips, we'll share some of the decisions and choices unique to each motivation. And to sum up, we'll give just one example of how to apply the insight to design for people with this motivation. So we'll start with waste not, want not. Waste not, want not is the largest motivation of the BC population at 22%. People with this motivation own and use only what they need and reduce waste in all aspects of their life. People with a waste not, want not motivation are resourceful and confident in their ability to live in alignment with their values. They demonstrate a strong belief that when we live like less is more, everyone benefits. They do a lot to live lighter, but with a few exceptions, like reducing hot water and energy use, most of their choices are not motivated by the planet. I'm going to play a clip of George to bring this motivation to life. George grew up in Scotland and attributes his hate of waste to the frugal culture he grew up in.
We're downsizing. We don't need all the stuff we have. And, you know, when we're dead and gone, the last thing the kids want is any of our stuff.
People with this motivation are more likely to be in a life stage that is less busy or choose a job that gives them more free time. And they're more likely to use their free time to volunteer in their community. However, it's not just a motivation for retired people, as we hear from Joanna.
Maybe I didn't have a lot growing up as well. You know, didn't have a lot of things, didn't have a lot of money, like our family wasn't like wealthy or rich, and a lot of my, I found joy in my childhood from doing sports and being on teams and experiences. So I just, I don't find things make me happy, really. Like just having stuff, it's like how you feel with those things.
Many of their choices are motivated by a desire to use what they have already and reduce clutter. They're also making choices to be budget conscious, such as buying secondhand or purchasing energy efficient appliances. To design for them, packaging, waste, and excess, anything must be minimized. They prefer to repair before buying new, but if they do, they will want to know what happens to your product at the end of its life. They are very motivated to keep things out of the landfill. Next is healthy life and planet. People with a healthy life and planet motivation are consciously and purposely making choices because of the climate emergency. Well, not as large as the waste not, want not in terms of the general population. This is a key motivation for us working to advance sustainability because they are the ones most motivated to be advocates for change in our communities. These are the system thinkers. They see the interrelationship between their health and the health of the planet. Because of this belief, they research to find safer alternatives and brings this mindset to life.
Well, it's only because of well, because I lost both my parents to cancer. My mom did a lot of research on oil and plastic, so man-made oils and plastic, and so it basically frightens me. And
people, or just a little bit more about Anne. Anne spent a lot of time on a sailboat and said that it really bothered her to see plastic in the ocean. But her concern was also about the safety of plastic packaging wrapped around the food that she ate. People motivated this way do most of the lighter living actions that we asked about in the study, both what they buy in their investments and related to civic activity, such as signing petitions and cleaning up their local environment. Ben brings this level of commitment to life.
So what I've done recently is I've talked to my investment advisor and got them to decarbonize my entire portfolio.
Time or perceived time is not a barrier for people with this motivation, and that's evident in their choices. They are doing more than the small, easy actions, and they take time for walking to stores, cooking at home, and repairing their goods. The opportunity here is to get more people motivated this way and to support them to do some of these actions even more frequently. To design for them, use facts in your communications. They take the time to understand the details as part of their decision-making. Without facts to support eco-friendly benefits, communications may feel at best lacking in supporting evidence, and at worst, like greenwashing. Next, we have eco-trends, and I'm going to introduce my colleague, Issa Braithwaite, who's going to talk to you about the next 3 motivation.
Thank you, Lindsey. This motivation, eco-trends, people with an eco-trends motivation make decisions for the planet, and also because they look to be a part of the broader movement towards social justice and supporting their local community. They are learning, following, and influencing others by sharing their choices through social networks. It's like an infinite loop, a virtuous cycle of learning and sharing with others. Bjorn brings this motivation to life. Bjorn moved here from Sweden a few years ago. He's a musician, and for him, the culture in Vancouver really made a difference and encouraged him to make more sustainable choices.
Buying secondhand after I came to Canada, for sure. Because one, that's just the style here, and like what people kind of are into, and it's really good. And 2, it's very available. It's very accessible. Like there is secondhand in Sweden, but small town Sweden does not have awesome secondhand shops where you can get what you want.
And relative to others, people with this motivation do more actions to live lighter, but are more focused on conscious consumption and buying less. Their biggest barrier to doing more is really time, as they are more likely to have full-time careers and families that keep them busy. Messaging that emphasizes eco attributes is motivating for them at a high level. They don't take the time to dig into all of the facts, and Savannah brings this to life in this clip.
That was, again, like so I love, honestly, I love almond milk and soy milk. Those are my favorites in any drink almost. But then I had a conversation with a friend. It was a random conversation, but she kind of told me about the environmental impact it had. And I don't know what it was necessarily. I think it was just like, I can make a difference no matter how minuscule. And so why not make that change over to oat milk and help where I can? It's not like I'm gonna die if I don't have my almond milk.
And by planning with them in mind, we can get them to do more actions more frequently, to support them in buying secondhand more often, or becoming an advocate for biking in their community. Make sure that the actions you want them to take are flexible to their busy schedules, and communicate a positive feeling of being part of a group of people who are creating cultural change for good. The next motivation is shop, style, and social. This motivation accounts for about 20% of the BC population. People with shop, style, and social motivation have a strong need to buy things and fit in with popular culture. They seek out new experience and things, especially those they can connect via the latest tech devices and apps. Their actions are motivated by what other people are doing and what's normal and or expected, more than by the planet. For some, their motivations to shop and the awareness of the climate emergency can cause a tension for them. Jerica brings this tension to life. Jerica is a young woman working as a barista who loves her friends, loves to travel, and loves taking advantage of what big cities have to offer, and is moving to London for law school in the fall.
I have the hardest time with, like, yes, there's my day-to-day purchases, but the big purchase, so like my fashion, there's a huge external pressure on women to look a certain way and to live sustainably and also fit some image. Like, that is a huge reason why I can't line up my values with my purchasing, because I am a 23-year-old woman. Like, I am expected to look a certain way and act a certain way, and I have to buy things that aren't sustainable so then I can find, you know, a partner, a life partner, and then.
So there is an opportunity here. While people with a shop style and social motivation usually don't support eco-friendly brands or initiatives today, our survey data suggests there are many lighter living actions they are open to doing. To design for shop, style, and social, make sure your product or service is mobile first. Communicate that your product or service is being enjoyed by many others like them, so that it seems like the thing to do. Our next motivation is practical traditions. The practical traditions motivation represents about 7% of the BC population. People with this motivation make choices based on practicality first. They look for the lowest prices, even if that means buying a little lower quality. The survey data suggests they strongly disagree that their actions are motivated by the planet. Here's Joe to bring this to life. Joe is a family man, a former trucker and a diehard Canucks fan. One of the things he takes pride in passing down to his kids.
Price, price and size. I could give a shit less about the environment.
What's really interesting about that clip is the reason, he's explaining the reason why he bought a hybrid vehicle. For him, he did the math on gas versus what he would save. And like he said, nothing to do with eco-friendly and everything to do with how much money he could keep. So while they aren't heavy consumers and only buy what they need relative to the other 6 motivations, people with this motivation are doing fewer actions to live lighter. While they need things to be easy, the biggest barrier is they are comfortable with what they know. Here's a clip from Lisa.
Sometimes if I know someone who can have children with under age of my son, yeah, sometimes I can ask if they need them, and if they say yes, it's okay, I can just give them. I have never sell things. I don't have time to do that. So.
Yeah, and this is telling. Given there are so many new ways to make money selling kids' clothes that you're finished with, Lisa's mind seems close to the opportunities like Facebook Marketplace. Their resistance to progressive values likely also means anything communicated as eco-friendly will be met with resistance. To design for them, communicate how any new action, product, or service is similar to what they know, helps them save money, and is easy to use. Lindsey will take us into the next motivation. Thank you.
Thank you, Issa. Next up, we have work hard, live large. People with a work hard, live large motivation have attitudes that reflect how much they enjoy spending money. They're motivated to reward themselves for working hard and providing for their family. For them, providing means buying products and services that give them comfort, convenience, luxury, and performance. Bev brings this motivation to life. Bev is retired and enjoys living in her small community, yet she was really proud that she was more tech savvy than her adult kids.
Miss Amazon over there, absolutely awesome for saving time, making life more convenient. You know, because I just come down and tell her turn on the lights, or turn off the lights, or ask how many inches are in a centimeter, or what's the weather like outside, or that's really convenient and saves a lot of time.
Relative to the other 6 motivations, people with a work hard, live large motivation do fewer actions to live lighter. They are also more likely to have several cars and bigger homes. This clip from Kirk, who works very hard as a producer of animated films, brings living large to life.
I went to France and Japan, and Noreen went to London as well. So yeah, we like the exotic as well. We like foreign countries.
It's not that people with this motivation are skeptical of climate change or anti-environment. Their biggest barrier is that they don't want to give up comfort or performance to be eco-friendly. Messaging that emphasizes eco attributes is not motivating for them, but they are open to buying local. To design for them, build in and communicate luxury or comfort or performance, and make your product or service easy to buy online. Sustainability benefits should not be the headline in the story. For example, people with a work hard, live large motivation are more likely to move into a larger detached home. during that new home life transition moment, as Vanessa mentioned earlier in the webinar, people with this motivation would likely be more motivated to upgrade their home for energy efficiency with, for example, a heat pump, which is both a heating and a cooling system, if the benefits focused more on their personal comfort at home and the convenience and performance of the latest technology. Our team has been joking that maybe it's time for heat pumps to have a rebrand, but I think if we could move to convey the benefits to people with a work hard, live large motivation, especially during this heat wave of the last week, I think heat pumps would be flying off the shelves. So we've come to our last motivation, which is rugged independence. People with a rugged independence motivation want to live how they like. They're motivated by individualistic values that are not inspired by other people's ways of life. They don't want anyone else to control their decision-making, and the survey data suggests they are less involved in their community compared to some of the other motivations. People with a rugged independence motivation actively choose not to consider the planet when making choices. This is in part because they're skeptical about the performance and durability of things positioned as eco-friendly and a little bit concerned about greenwashing, and they're unwilling to pay more for green options. However, the way they choose to live does include some significant lighter living actions, like repairing before buying new, especially, and they're motivated by a desire for self-sufficiency and skills. People with this motivation are more likely to live in northern BC, but here is Dave, who lives in the Fraser Valley.
It's work to plant your own garden and maintain it. So, but the rewards you get from it are pretty good. And one of the things that we've discovered that we want to be more into is being more self-sustaining, not having to run to the grocery store. But, you know, if we could grow our own food, then we're trying to move into more of a prepping attitude now. So being able to sustain our family on whatever we already have. So doing canning and growing our own foods, I think, is important going forward, and it's proven just recently how important prepping can actually be.
To design communications for people with a rugged independence motivation, use facts and rational points to emphasize how lighter living choices align with their high needs for self-reliance, durability, and utility. They're likely to seek proof of the durability of products, such as warranties. I would avoid eco-friendly benefits in communications, as people with this motivation really need the benefits to be for them. So as we move into, again, summarizing all motivations together, Max is going to bring back our poll again and ask, now that you know more about the motivations, which would you now say that you most relate to with the further insight that we've shared? Hopefully everyone has had a chance to answer the poll, and we can bring up the results. Looks like it's pretty consistent for this group. So thanks so much for playing along and sharing with us what your motivations are. I'm now going to hand it back over to Dagmar to continue.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Lindsey and to Issa for that great overview of the 7 motivations. As you see here on the right-hand column, we have design for, so these are tips and tricks for how to engage more with those 7 motivations. And you'll see those as part of a report. So next slide, please. So we have, next slide. So we have a report coming out next week, and it builds from the launch event that we have today. So all 7 motivations will be shown, and I'll walk through what's in that report. As well, Rosemary Cooper will be walking us through sort of how to actually take action using those, because the report will include a table of actions on key areas like mobility, and showing us who the first movers are, who we're calling the convincibles, and who are less or disinterested. So next slide. So each motivation overview has this page in it, and it's a bit of a one-pager that you could keep at your desk for activation. It shows you what we think are the top lighter living action opportunities, which are built from our understanding of both the qualitative interviews that we've done and what they say that they're most open to. So what are the greatest potential to engage these motivations in, and then there's the design for what this segment needs and values and how we can speak more clearly to them. Next slide. Each motivation also has the actions that they do now. So we ask people about a range of actions they currently do, more and less aligned with lighter living. So you'll see some things that aren't exactly like on the nose for lighter living behaviors, but it gives you an overview of who this person is and how they live now. Next slide. And then there's a page which is like the fine print to help fine tune your strategy. So this gives you some of the demographic concentrations that are significant for this segment as compared to others, and also where they get their information. So do they like traditional media sources? Are they people who are really interested in social media? Where are they getting their their information about how to live their life? And also, do they engage more with facts and rational thought, or more with emotion and pleasure? So these are some of the things that you're going to find in that piece of information. Now, to note, of course, those demographic concentrations, people across British Columbia demonstrate a lot of these motivations, but these are the people who have this as their dominant motivation. Next slide. So back to our matrix here. How do we turn those motivations and these overviews of the motivations into opportunity areas for your organization or your business? How do we really move people towards the right? This is something that'll tap into your intuition and what you already know about the campaigns that you run, or about the businesses, or about the products that you have. But it's also an invitation to kind of stretch beyond who we normally speak to and sort of engage with ones who may not be the ones that we normally speak with. So now we'll hear from the project's co-presenter, the Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative. They're a project of Makeway's shared platform, and they work to really advance the inner loops of the circular economy. So Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative is alongside with us a member of the Shift 1.5 community that Sitra has spoken about, and they led the Do-It-Yourself Toolkit and gave strategic input into the motivations, especially around the circular economy and stuff. So we wanted to make these motivations ready to use. And so this is how we're going to do it. And the report will have this whole, we'll have a starter bit of do it yourself, and then we'll also share further information. So OneEarth Senior Associate Rosemary Cooper and Lead Project Director of Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative, over to you.
Thanks so much, Dagmar. Thrilled to be here today, and just, loving all these beautifully designed resources that are available. So I'm going to take you through today basically the outline of a DIY toolkit that will be made available online later in the summer. And I hope you guys are all ready to kind of put these motivations into action. I know I am, and particularly with this great set of well-designed resources that provide just such tremendous insights. There's going to be 2 versions to the DIY toolkit, one that's tailored to a private sector audience, and another to public-facing audiences, cities and nonprofits and others. with some nuanced content. But I'm going to talk generally today about both in the interests of time. Next slide, please. So this is what the DIY toolkit is going to contain. You can see number 6 there on the slide. It's going to have a summary table of all 7 motivations, so a place that you can quickly look at it. It's going to have action area briefings, and these are 2 pages that go into specific categories that you might be focused on: eating and food, transportation, getting around, home, stuff, and other general daily living actions. And these are a very valuable and useful sort of quick, handy resource to look at. But it's also going to have a bit of a workshop outline, a DIY workshop outline that's going to be linked to program, product, or service development. You heard from Sitra that they used it in this manner, particularly with startups, but it can be used for businesses of all and organizations of all sizes, and also a focus on communications and marketing as well. And launching in the fall is going to be kind of a fun and engaging 10-question quiz that people can take, and it will allow you to segment yourself into one of those 7 motivations. It'll be interesting to see whether you end up being segmented into the same ones that you sort of had a gut instinct that you would fall into today. Next slide, please. So there's such a diversity of ways that these lighter living motivations can be used. And here I've kind of broken them down into a variety of options for these 2 sort of core audiences, the private sector and public facing. So you can use it as part of a user-centered design process to inform your product and service development, but you can also use it to strengthen the business case for an investor pitch. And there's particularly a component that shows the percentage of BCers that are already oriented towards the program or service that you're offering, as well as those that are open to it. You can use it to refine your marketing strategy and content, but also as an opportunity to communicate climate commitment to existing customers. And as I mentioned before, startups, it can be used both to help you kind of really identify and dig into your target markets and really reinforce your business planning at a kind of a critical early and iterative stage of development. And for public-facing audiences, cities and nonprofits and others, you can really use it to inform and target your behavior change campaigns and maybe extend the reach and meet people with new motivations that you haven't reached previously. You can have it as part of a conversation if you have a lighter living project at the neighborhood level to make sure that you go beyond. Certainly you want to bring in those folks that are the eco niche, as we call them, but can you have a conversation with neighbors that might have different motivations and reasons for lighter living? You can use it to build the membership base of a campaign and extend it beyond to a broader number of people. Again, expand the reach and relevance and support just better conversations about lighter living. So Max, I'm hoping you can launch a poll, and I'm curious to know how you might use these motivations. For this poll, you can choose as many options as you like. So please take a moment and read through and let us know how you think you might use it. I know there are some longer choices here. I hope you've had a chance to respond. When you're ready, Max, let's see how people have voted. Okay, so a real mixture of folks, which of options for how you would use these motivations, which I think is exactly what we have had in mind. Top coming out here to refine marketing strategy and content, but equally strong to support better conversations around climate action, to improve an environmental campaign. So really kind of on the really understand those better understand your target markets to engage a greater diversity of people. But also some folks seeing the rationale behind improving the design of a new product or service, strengthen the business case. We certainly heard that from some businesses earlier. So great to see those variety of options. I think they can be used across the board. Next slide, please. Great. So while there are 2 different toolkits and a variety of different ways that you can use the motivations, common to all is this first step, and that is to go through and to identify your relevant motivations. So you can use the materials, and in step 1, pick 1 to 2 motivations that are a clear fit. Another way to think of these is these are your existing audiences or target markets or your first movers. But also see if you can find 1 to 2 motivations that are a stretch or that you haven't reached, but that are worth it for you to reach. And then dive deeper into the motivations to confirm your decisions and consider why you chose those motivations. And I think what you're really asking yourself is how can you serve those existing audiences or target markets, but while also considering the opportunity and the time to stretch to engage people with new motivations. Next slide. So there's some great materials to support you with this. These are the 5 action area briefings that are really helpful to help you determine your primary or first mover and your stretch motivations. And you can see in this diagram here that you've got a variety of people doing the same thing around energy efficiency in their homes, but for different reasons. Next slide, please. So here's just a wonderful table that I think is a really great way to really easily discern the first movers and the convincibles or the stretch motivations at a glance. So for example, you can take a look here at, eat more plant-based vegetarian meals, and you can see just immediately that healthy life and planet and eco trends are your primary or your first mover motivations, but you can also see that waste not, want not, and shop style and social are motivations that would be open to this if you speak to them in a way that meets their motivations. Next slide, please. So the next step, regardless of whether you're doing this for marketing or communications or a campaign or product and service design, is to dive deeper with your team and check in. Did others on your team pick the same motivations? Why or why not? And where can you land? And to go through and really think what appeals to each motivation, how might you design or reach them, but also equally as important, what might turn off each motivation and should be avoided, and to consider how this will inform your work as you move forward. Next slide, please. So a component of this, as I mentioned, is that they can be used to inform program, product, or service design around various aspects of lighter living. And there are obviously different steps, but key to what we do across private and public sectors are the basic steps of ideate, design, and test and launch, so that you can get these programs or services that support meaningful lighter living actions and solve a problem for your key audiences and target markets. In an effort to yes, meet your existing audiences, but also to stretch beyond them. As a means to improve your market share, sales and market share if you're a business, or to improve your, goals of a campaign or a behavior change program if you're a public sector. So next slide, please. Really important to don't forget that every motivation has a design for section. So it's really easy to pull out in that last example of plant-based meals, for example, that you can see if you want to reach the stretch sort of group of waste not, want not, then you really want to make sure that you're focusing on price and discounts, facts and rational thought. If, on the other hand, you want to reach through to shop style and social, make sure that those eco attributes are secondary in your messaging and your program or product design, and that you're pulling out the tech-enabled, the social sharing, and the emotion and pleasure messaging and benefits. Next slide, please. Great. You can also use these for communications and marketing. Two things, both to sharpen the relevance with your existing audiences, but also to reach new audiences or markets that I've stressed before. Next slide, please. And really, you're going through the same set of steps. You've identified who is your primary and who is your stretch, or your first movers and convincibles is another way. And really kind of think about what of your communications or marketing messages, imageries, and calls to actions are really engaging them, what might be turning them off, and how to refine your communications based on what you learn. You might consider, for those stretch motivations, engaging representatives of those motivations to learn more deeply about how they respond to your communications. Next slide, please. Finally, I'd like to add, in the area of lighter living or sustainable living, some of the products and services and programs that we have can suffer from the notorious say-do gap or intention behavior gap. And what this means is that there's a gap between the behavior that people say they're willing to take on and what they actually do. So very pleased to say that we've taken another tool, which is Sitra's Shift Framework, which is about best practical ways to encourage ecologically sustainable behavior. And I believe Alice was going to put a link in that shows you where you can see the initial Sitra report. And thank you to Sitra for initiating this wonderful thing as well. We're very pleased to say that we have had a first pilot program to take that Shift framework, and we had 7 businesses, 1 city, and 1 nonprofit who participated. And they went through the process to develop and test persuasive messaging to address the various psychological, social, emotional, and behavior change needs of their target markets, and to shift behaviors in desired directions to support their business and public sector goals. What was exciting about doing this is that we were able to bring the lighter living motivations into the beginning stages of this and reinforce it throughout. So they were really used to support target market identification and to go deeper into understanding those target markets to inform the related messaging. We have a recording of a recent webinar where we shared those results, and we'll be producing a program brief that will feature the Shift program, examples of participants and the steps they went through and the results, and also a DIY toolkit. So please stay tuned for that. I think it's just a wonderful example of how these various Sitra tools through the Shift 1.5, it's a bit of confusing because there's 2 Shift, but anyway, this global community of practice can kind of create these wonderful synergies to support our transition to lighter living. Back to you, Dagmar.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. That was such a helpful overview of what we're offering in terms of the do-it-yourself kit. So as you've heard from Rosemary and from the rest of the team, we want to use these motivations to help support you to make meaningful lighter living action mainstreamed within British Columbia and around the world, and also engage and support your audiences or target markets in a much more rich way. So we'll be launching the report next week, and it'll help us to, and that report will have all the details that you've seen here, as well as that deeper level of detail. Let me go back to the poll for a moment, because it was so interesting. So we often engage at a really high level with our audiences or the people that we're working with. And sometimes we call them like the choir or all of this, but people are much more nuanced than this. And often we have a mix of motivations, including and well beyond the planet. So even if we care about the environment, we might still not be primarily motivated by that in our sustainable everyday lives. So now back to that poll. Rosemary noticed that there were some changes in the poll results. So there were more waste not, want not people, more people that identified with healthy life and planet, less shop style and social, and a few people that actually came in on the other smaller motivations. So we want to help people self-identify for themselves to understand what drives their decision-making, but also understand that nuance within their target markets. And when we do that, we go beyond talking about the choir or, let's put out our environmental message. But we think about the difference between, say, Healthy Life and Planet and Eco-Trends, who are both planet motivated, but are quite different from each other. And they make up 24%. But Waste Not, Want Not is 22% of the population. So very, very interesting. So there's more than just the green niche. There are many more motivations than that. And almost every motivation had lighter living actions that were happening. And some are indeed like even choosing not to do something or living a more minimalist or frugal life. So we also heard some things like that eco-trends, shop style, and social can help each other with mainstreaming and being motivated by the norms. So away from shopping as a means of showing sort of their lifestyle, eco-trends is a bit of a wayfinder, and they can help sort of make some trends mainstreamed. So we need a more systemic approach, of course, because some of the reason why things like taking public transit doesn't get mainstreamed is because of the systems that are in place or not for people to pick up those actions. And so it really asks us to be involved with our municipal governments, to be involved as advocates within our lives to push for more sustainable practices and enabling those. The final story is that this isn't just about green consumerism. This is about shifting ways of living. We're not going to get there without sufficiency. In a big way, sort of what the enoughness story is and alternative ways of living, and how do we make those positive stories? And Waste Not, Want Not has a lot to tell us about that story. So over to the next slide. So we're really excited to adapt these motivations here in British Columbia, and we're interested in doing it also in other parts of the world with Sitra and with the Share, Reuse, Repair initiative. So definitely reach out to us if we can help you in the kind of way that Modo and Vancity have been using these. And also, as you start to play with the toolkit itself, if you're finding that it's leading to interesting insights, please do share those back with us. We'll give you that information in a follow-up email. We can run the segmentation again for your target audience, for example, and possibly develop a place or sector specific survey. Some of those are fee for service and some are co-funding or partnering. And then we're also going to be launching a quiz in the fall where you can find out more about your motivation. So over to the last slide, which is that that we look forward to just hearing from you right now, some of the things that have been popping for you and some of the questions. So Alice and I will be taking a look at some of those questions, and the whole panel will be able to reply to them. So there you see our team that you've heard from many of us. And let me just introduce our other colleagues who you have not seen. So of course, Sari, Laine from Sitra, Lindsey, Boyle from OneEarth, Majid, Khoury, who led on the quantitative and analysis with our colleague Graham Lindsey, Issa, Braithwaite, and then from the OneEarth team, we have Edna Katumbala, Alice Henry, Max Serpa, and Vanessa Timmer, Executive Director, and Rosemary Cooper with us from Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative, and then Sarah Stott from Vancity. So Alice, do you want to walk us through some of the questions that we've received?
Yeah, so the question that has gotten the most upvotes, and we've answered briefly already, but would love to answer live as well, is from Mark Wandler. Did the research show any conflicting motivations? For example, if you target one, should you avoid messaging that targets another?
Great. Why don't I start us off by asking Lindsey for a quick reflection, and we'll do these as sort of rapid fire reflections.
That's a great question. And I think in the work that we did, we also built on a matrix, which we didn't share here. But I think one of the most actionable insights about Mark's question is that we had a matrix which showed that there are motivations that prefer to have messaging which talks about emotion and pleasure in terms of the benefits for them, versus communication that really is heavy on facts and rational points, which really are more convincing and speak to some of the motivations as convincing reasons why someone might consider a product or service. So that to me is maybe the biggest guide in terms of where there's opposition. So by memory, for the emotion and pleasure, the eco trends, for example, I talked about how they don't look into the detail. They kind of want to know that they're going to receive a good feeling by being part of a movement, but they don't want to dig into the detail. So they don't want to see the facts. Compared to the Healthy Life and Planet, for example, they really need the facts. And in fact, if the facts are not present, for example, in an ingredient list, if things are not, clearly declared, or, the information that they're looking for to confirm whether the ingredients are sustainable, if it's not there, they will really have a hard time being convinced to buy your product or service. So I think that distinction between use emotion and pleasure in your communications as a benefit versus facts and rational thought are included in each of the 5-page reports, as well as the design for summary. And that would give you a good indication of where there might be opposition in terms of how to communicate to each motivation.
Thank you very much, Lindsey.
Yeah, I can come in on this as well. This is Vanessa Timmer with OneEarth. And just to note that there's been some research about exactly this, that there could be values in conflict. And I'll put a link in the chat about the Common Cause Foundation that's looked at this. That sometimes when you emphasize, for example, cost savings, it actually brings people's attention to that kind of extrinsic value of saving costs for yourself. And there in a way, if you're wanting to engage people who are more focused on the we side of things, so thinking about the community as a whole, or about how values that have more to do with, for example, self-efficacy in society, or purpose, or belonging, it actually is helpful to not try and combine, a cost-saving thing, which might be a very particular motivation that we might have, with this kind of more outward-facing, larger picture type of motivation or values. So I think there is, in all of these things, I don't think you don't want to be trying to communicate in the same messaging to all of these motivations. The idea is to start really thinking about a different messaging for different values and different motivations. So I'll just put the Common Cause work in there, because I think there are sometimes times we shut certain things down, we shut certain things off by activating, for example, price. We might shut down this larger value towards society and our kind of obligation to society. That's just one example.
Thank you so much. Alice, what is another question we might dig into?
We also had another question. Do we have a sense of which motivations tend to correlate? For example, do people with the rugged and independence motivation tend to not have other secondary motivations that are so-called eco-friendly?
Great. Majid, over to you. Do you have a quick response on that one?
I mean, it's not as black and white that one correlates with another. So it's really a matter of what we've seen is, and we looked at primary versus secondary motivations. There is overlap, but the overlap is more kind of across like 3 to 4 motivations, as opposed to one is completely not there. So it's very difficult to say that these motivations work in separation of each other. It's more about the primary and dominant motivation versus everything else that could flow at different levels of strength across many of the other motivations.
Great. Anything to add from Sari or Graham to that? No, all good. Great, thank you. Alice, thanks, Majid.
Okay, and this question comes in from Patrick Nangle. Do you see value in crossing these motivations with demographics for additional insights and to inform marketing actions? Have you done that?
Great. So perhaps I'll just answer that one to say that absolutely. So so we do have a very large data bank of how this cross-cuts with demographics, but it's important to note that these are not personas. So just because there are, say, many men or people living up north who tend to concentrate with that dominant motivation doesn't mean that this is northern men, for example, to talk about the rugged independence one. So there are people across the province that display that dominant motivation, but that we saw concentrations in certain places. And so where that concentration is really interesting or shows up very strongly, we've noted those in the report itself, and they're on that page. That's the fine-tuned details. Anything to add to that, Majid?
Yes, maybe I'll add something is, I mean, you know, many of the people on the webinar have worked with segmentations and personas. And what we find when we're looking at those is the demographic over or under indexing by persona is pretty strong. Like, you know, this persona has 1.3 index on a certain gender or another. In this case, those over or under indexing were not as drastic as what we see with personas, which supports again that it's not necessarily, it's a demographic cluster. Yeah, for this group, you know, 50% of them are within this generation, but again, it's not that 80% of them will end up in this generation. So you have to be very careful looking at them as more a cluster as opposed to a defining demographic variance between one group that's motivated by one aspect versus another.
Yeah, yeah, and you'll get some tips as to where to reach these people to, what kind of media they enjoy, what kind of other aspects of them. I think a last question, Alice, and then we'll close off, if there is just a short one. And
oh, we just had one come in from Liam Russell. Do any of the motivations align with access to lightening options? And actually not quite clear on lighter living with.
Great.
Liam, if you want to add any clarification to that question, feel free as well. Access to lightening options regarding what, but we'll try and get to that answer and at some point.
And so we're actually at time now. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that we will be releasing the report next week, and we'll send an email to everyone who registered as well as all of the attendees. So everyone who's here on the telephone, it'll also be available on our OneEarth website, which we'll type into the chat box right now, but all of that will be available in a follow-up message. So thank you so much to everybody for joining us today for this launch of these 7 motivations for lighter living in British Columbia. As on behalf of OneEarth and Share, Reuse, Repair Initiative and our sponsors and co-sponsors for the project, we very much look forward to working with all of you to be activating these here and to be seeing about other adaptations in different parts of Canada and around the world. So thank you so much again, and thank you to the panelists for your great presentations. Have a lovely rest of the day.